A few of you are hosting roundtable discussions, or you wish to have breakout discussion groups within your sessions. These are called live meeting sessions, and they run using Zoom meetings. Live meeting sessions are sessions where all attendees are able to speak, appear on camera, and share their screens. It's basically everyone is in one room together. It's very egalitarian. Note that these sessions pop out of the Pathable platform and they open in the Zoom client, which makes it a little bit harder to toggle back and forth to the chat and poll features of the Pathable platform. But these should not be as big a deal for you since these types of sessions are really about interacting via video with the participants. In other words, we don't expect too much chat going on because you're actually chatting via voice on the platform itself. So note that these pop out into that Zoom client. This type of meeting format is ideal for roundtable discussions or for sessions where you wish to put attendees into smaller breakout discussion groups. The only way to have those discussion groups is in a meeting session. So the majority of folks do have webinar style for this conference. If you have webinar style but are realizing that you'd prefer to have a meeting where all folks can unmute each other, where you can put people into a breakout room, please let me know as soon as you possibly can. Note again that the particular Zoom Q&A poll and chat functions are disabled in favor of Pathable's version. However, because these conversations, these types of sessions are really about conversation amongst the group, we don't expect that you'll be having a lot of chat on the text while the session itself is happening. You'll need to use the Pathable polls feature to moderate any questions. But again, unlike webinars, folks can just unmute themselves and ask you directly. So we don't really expect too much of an issue with that, but do want to highlight that for those of you who are presenters. Like with other sessions, the page looks relatively the same. This is an example of a live video meeting. I'll just highlight here, please ignore this part. I couldn't figure out how to take off this particular sponsored by button in advance of the screen grab, and this is not something that will appear in the final version. So I'm drawing your attention to ask you to ignore it. But otherwise, this is what the agenda looks like for a video meeting session. There will be a countdown on the side until the session itself begins. You'll have information about the speakers, about what company or companies they're from, of course, the abstract for the session. And you'll still have those chat, polls, people, and file access as before. The only thing is that when the video itself starts, it'll pop out into a new window, which makes it a little bit more difficult for you to toggle back and forth between that Zoom window and looking at the chat features here. As with other sessions, when you are ready to start your session, you'll click on Manage up here. That'll take you to the back end of your session. The screen grab is from a different title. It'll take you to the back end of your specific session, which will again show the countdown to when the meeting begins, allow you space for you to upload as presenter your files, create polls, view who has registered and checked in for your session. And most importantly, this is how you will enter the meeting as a presenter through this Manage tab. You'll be able to start the meeting 20 minutes early in order to confirm that everything works for yourself. 1 minute before the start time, other folks will be able to join the live meeting, or you can actually start it if it hasn't already been started. And the meeting itself will end about 10 minutes after the session time. So it's okay if you go over by a few minutes, but 10 minutes, it'll automatically end to give folks a chance to join new sessions. So with this type of video conference, as I said, you're going to be talking to participants on camera, unmuting multiple people to talk to each other, perhaps going into discussion breakout groups. It can get a little complicated to manage all of that process. And some folks have asked about including session producers. So additional producers are not a prerequisite, but we do recommend that you assign somebody to be a producer for the session. If you have multiple panelists or multiple speakers already for your session, you might just decide to designate one person as the producer. What that means is that person will be the one who's responsible for making sure the meeting is recorded, who will be able to review the polls and pull out any questions or issues that are coming up, a direct conversation on the session chat. manage those discussion breakouts if that's something that you're doing. So again, that role can be fulfilled by an existing presenter, assuming that they're not speaking the entire time. When they're sort of not speaking, they can play this role for you. Or you might choose to invite a new person to play that role in your session. This is very important. Only folks who are already registered for Summit can act as session producers. We are not able to provide speaker discounts to these non-speaker roles. And so ideally, if this will be somebody from your panel already, in which case we don't need to do anything. You just internally designate who's responsible for what. Or you can invite somebody perhaps from your organizational contingent who's joining the conference to join this particular session, not have any speaking roles, but just provide that support on the back end. If you'd like to do that, that individual must already be registered for Summit separately, so they should have already received access through your organization. And the only thing I will need to know is their name and email address by that final deadline of September 11th. Having their name and address, the email address will allow us to add them on the back end. They won't appear on the session page as a speaker here. So let's say I'm the producer for Madison and Madeline. I won't appear listed here, but I will get that speaker access to the Manage tab. So I'm able to join early, upload full files, create polls, etc. But this is something that you might choose to do. Perhaps you have these discussion breakouts planned, but you're not super well versed in Zoom and are a little nervous about that. Or, there's only one of you. This is maybe a roundtable led by one or two people, and you'd feel more comfortable having a third person sort of manage the tech side for you. We're happy to have that person fulfill this role, but please note that they will not appear as a speaker. Instead, they will be a session producer. If your producer is one of your speakers, you don't need to tell me. You don't need to do anything. They will, of course, as a speaker, still appear on your page. Again, this is really just highlighting if you needed to bring in an additional person, we can do so. And if you choose to bring in an additional person who's not already on your panel or session, you need to let me know by September 11th at the very latest. Again, not a required position, but just an option if it will help make you feel more comfortable the day of your live meeting. As with other sessions, we ask that you use one of these two images in your title slide. You'll have access to these on the presenter page. Use whichever option you prefer and just add the session title. You can have subsequent slides in whatever template you prefer that show further details about your session, your speakers, etc. But just for the very first title, we ask that you use one of these two images. If you use the black image, use white text. If you use the white image, use black text. What we ask you to do is to layer this image over your title slide so that it covers the whole slide, and then layer on top of that your title slide text. If you don't have a deck, for example, you might have a roundtable discussion that doesn't really have a presentation component. I just ask that you fill out this title slide still, share it on the screen for a few moments in the beginning of your recording, and then you can stop your screen share and go back to video conferencing as you normally would. But regardless of whether or not you have a full-fledged presentation, please make sure that you add this title slide to your session itself. By way of checklist for this particular session, you should be able to check off the first feature. I should already have your title, abstract, and speaker, although I understand that things might change. So again, if you need to make any edits, you can still do so, but up until September 11th. If you're using a non-speaker producer, you must let me know their name and email address by that date, September 11th. And note again that we will not be able to offer discounts for that person to register. So they should already be registered separately. Make sure that you add that title slide to your presentation deck. When you get access to Pathable, which will be after September 20th, but before September 28th, when everybody gets access, make sure that you create your speaker profile. You upload your photo, you add your bio, you add your LinkedIn page, etc. Really fill out that speaker profile. The week of September 28th is when all of Summit attendees will get access to the Pathable platform to create their attendee profiles. And we really want them to come in and see the agenda fleshed out and know who all the speakers for their sessions are. So please fill that out as soon as you can. It took me all of 10 minutes. So not a very difficult task there. At the same time, when you get that access, make sure that you review your particular session page and confirm that everything looks correct. Email me if a logo is off, there's a typo, a weird squiggle, an accent didn't translate and there's a squiggle instead in the text, right? That type of thing. Any issues you find on your page, email me as soon as you see those, and we'll do our best to get those fixed as soon as possible. At that time, when you have that early access, you're also able to upload any relevant files, create any necessary poll questions that you'd like to. And we encourage you to do that well ahead of the day of the conference. Please don't wait until the day of your specific session to start creating files and polls. It's just a lot easier for you to get that done well in advance. We also ask that you join that video meeting up to 20 minutes early to enter the green room. Doesn't mean you have to be there 20 minutes early. That's just the very earliest that you can actually access it. So make sure you get in there a few minutes early. If you're not sharing a deck, it's not a complicated back and forth. You can still make sure that the audio works, that your camera appears crisp, etc. So just take a few minutes early on to be in the green room to welcome attendees when the session actually starts. And very important, since these are meetings and not automatically recorded webinars, as the session host, you will need to be responsible for hitting record on the session. Please keep in mind that the first individual who goes in through the back end is labeled the host. Everybody else is a co-host. So if you do have a session producer, you want to make sure that that person goes in first so they get that host designation via Zoom. The host is the one who's able to hit record. So it's very important that whoever has that responsibility is aware of that and fulfills that before the session begins. Here's a screen grab of what that looks like. Again, when you haven't recorded, it's not showing any red buttons or anything like that. So you need to hit record down here, and very important, hit record to the cloud. If you record to your computer, you'll need to send us the file. It'll cause a delay for other attendees who are hoping to access the recording sooner rather than later. So it's a whole thing. And then you have to deal with the file. So really make sure that you record on the cloud so that Pathable can take care of the session and not you. This is what it looks like when you've actually hit record. You'll see the recording button sort of floating. You are able to pause or stop the recording. So once you can see that you can pause or stop, you know that you're actually recording the session. Again, this is your checklist of items to complete before. Note that the final deadline for all changes is September 11th. You do not need to submit anything to me ahead of time since you have a live meeting. However, you do have the option to upload your deck ahead of time if that's something that you have. You do have the option to create those polls ahead of time, and you do that directly via the Pathable app. The only thing I need from you is, if it is changing, to send any updated speaker information, and if you're adding a non-speaker producer, to make sure that I have their information no later than Friday, September 11th. Thank you.